Disney California Adventure is perhaps the most controversial Disney theme park out there. Most would agree that the top rides at this park are very good, but when you get into the rest of the ride lineup and how this park has developed from a theme standpoint, there's a lot of questions that can come up. Over the course of this park's life, it has drifted pretty far from the original vision. It all started when, of course, Disney wanted to add to the Disneyland Resort in a major way, extending the stay of most families at the resort. One of the original ideas for this expansion was a Westcott Center, modeling itself after Walt Disney World's Epcot. Of course, this didn't end up happening, and instead, they decided to go with more of a heavy California theme. On opening day, which was February 8, 2001, California Adventure actually honored its name and state by having an entrance to look like the Golden Gate Bridge and attractions themed to the state. For example, California Screamin' or Soarin' Over California. The park had 4 main areas. These include Sunshine Plaza, Hollywood Backlot, the Golden State, and Paradise Pier. Unfortunately though, this park did not receive great reviews upon opening, and attendance was definitely not what they had hoped it would have been. The main thing to discuss in this video is how you can tour and visit California Adventure in 2025. But to understand what it was like in 2001 is pretty important because this park has changed drastically. It's changed to the point that it hardly even resembles a California themed park at this point. And at this juncture, only a few sections actually honor the state, those being Hollywoodland, loosely, and Grizzly Peak. The other areas have been modified and IPs have been added. Paradise Pier became Pixar Pier, Cars Land was added later down the road, and Avengers Campus was also added pretty recently, with Guardians of the Galaxy replacing Tower of Terror. This park hardly resembles the DCA of 2001, and frankly, it's an odd mashup of ideas, themes, areas, and attractions. For example, one moment you're in Hollywoodland, and one step later you're in Avengers Campus with no transition. There are just some weird oddities like that. Some people call this park a little bit of a mess, and you can kind of understand why. There have been so many different things that have gone on throughout this park's history, and the vision that it originally opened with is almost completely gone. For those reasons, it certainly is an interesting park to experience and to know some of the history of. So in 2025, what does it look like to visit DCA? Well, as you might imagine, visiting this park and the Disneyland Resort as a whole can be quite time-consuming to plan. Frankly, though, you should have a pretty in-depth plan, at least in my opinion, because if you go into this resort and this park without a plan, you're going to find yourself in a lot of long lines. And even if you do go in with a great plan, there's a good chance you'll still wait in a couple of long lines, because this resort gets some of the highest attendance of any resort in the world. The good news in terms of California Adventure versus Disneyland is that Disneyland gets more visitors on a yearly basis, and also because of when Disneyland was built, the pathways are not nearly big enough to contain those crowds in most cases, in particular in Fantasyland and Adventureland. I think when some of those attractions and areas opened 70 years ago, they weren't really expecting the crowd levels that they got. The good news is that California Adventure was built many years later and was built with crowds in mind. Pathways in general are much wider, and so you won't feel nearly as cramped in there. This is a nice change, and between that and the fact that California Adventure literally has less people in the park most days, you get, in general, quieter pathways, at least for Disney standards. Now, this park can still receive upwards of 10 million visitors in a year, so there will still be a lot of people in there and a lot of people queuing for those main attractions. This is where a good touring plan can become very helpful. But before we get to how you tackle California Adventure, we need to provide a little bit more context on the resort as a whole. Knowing this will help us better understand how to tackle a park like DCA. Now, the first thing we have to talk about is that Disneyland and Disney California Adventure are both a part of and connected to the Downtown Disney shopping district. Downtown Disney is free to enter, though you'll have to go through security. That's where they do the security checks for the parks as well. And it features a wide array of shops and dining. This is a nice option for those that don't really want to go in the theme park or want to take a break from the hustle and bustle of the theme park to go get a bite to eat outside the park's gates. Downtown Disney will still be busy most days, but definitely less crowded than inside the park's gates. Now, as you might imagine, some of the food items might be a little more expensive than you're used to because this ultimately still is a part of the Disneyland Resort. Many of the resort hotels also connect to Downtown Disney. When you're looking at resort hotels, they are going to be pretty expensive, as you might imagine. Depending on the season and day, rates will range from $400 to over $700. Now, one of the things to keep in mind here is that for the most part, it's actually longer to walk to the park's entrances from the resort hotels than it is for non-resort hotels. This is the case for every hotel if you're going to Disneyland, and it's the case because you have to walk down the entirety of downtown Disney, which can take a little while. There is an exception to this rule though via a couple of hotels if you are starting your day at California Adventure. The first, of course, is the Grand Californian. In a lot of ways, this hotel is absolutely beautiful, and it's by far the best hotel you're going to find at the Disneyland Resort. Unsurprisingly, it also is by far the most expensive, which is something you have to keep in mind and compare with your budget for your trip. This hotel is so close to the park that you can see it when you're riding Goofy Sky School or when you're in Grizzly Peak. On that note, the Grand Californian does have a special entrance into Grizzly Peak. And actually, this hotel has the best location for Disneyland as well. You are right there near the Esplanade. So the Grand Californian has a terrific location regardless of what park you're going to first, but the Pixar Place Hotel is a little bit different. If you're going to Disneyland first, you still have to go down the entirety of downtown Disney. But if you're going to California Adventure first, it's really helpful because this hotel has a special entrance by Goofy Sky School and the Corn Dog Castle on Pixar Pier. Perhaps the biggest positive though with staying at a resort hotel is early entry. So every other day, it flips back and forth between parks, you will get early entry to one of the two theme parks. For example, one day it'll be Disneyland, the next it'll be California Adventure, and so on. Definitely make sure to check the website in advance for what parks have early entry on which days and for which attractions are available because that bounces around as well. When you have early entry, you get in 30 minutes before official park opening time and have access to a select group of rides and experiences. So what's the takeaway if you're not staying at a resort hotel? Well, the takeaway if you're not staying at a resort hotel is to avoid rope dropping a park on the day when it has early entry, if you can. Some of those rides you want to go to first could already have a pretty sizable wait by the time you get to them at official park opening time, even if you're at the very front of the rope drop crowd. So if California Adventure has early entry on any given day, try to rope drop Disneyland that day instead. Now, you of course don't have to stay on a resort hotel, and if you stay on a non-resort hotel, there are many options, in particular on South Harbor Boulevard, which is just across the street from the Esplanade. Most of these are closer to the front entrances than a lot of those resort hotels are, so the walking distance is pretty favorable. Rates depend on the season and the day, but they run from $150 to upwards of $300, typically more affordable. And even though you don't have early entry, I tend to believe that some of these hotels provide the best value for any hotel when visiting the Disneyland Resort. It does depend slightly as well on how much time you're actually going to be spending in your hotel. If you just want to get the best value and the shortest walking distance to the park, these hotels might be for you. But if you want to spend more time at your hotel, then perhaps a resort hotel is where you want to be. So you've got your hotel booked, let's now look at ticket prices. As you might imagine, this resort and California Adventure is one of the more expensive parks you're going to visit. Firstly, as of 2025, you must have a reservation to visit. Always check for sales and reduced rates as well online because a ticket is going to start at $103 and range upwards of $200. Now they are smart because the more days you go, the cheaper per day it becomes. And if you're a Southern California resident, your tickets will start at $67, which is a pretty sizable discount. If you want to add a park hopper, which I think you probably will, it's going to add $65 to $75 per ticket per day. Then, if you want to use the skip the line system, which is Lightning Lane, that'll run you another $36 per ticket per day. This is a decent price considering what you get, in particular when you compare it to other FastPass systems in the theme park industry, but it has doubled in the last few years. Of course, back in the day, the FastPass system that Disney invented was totally free, but those days are long gone. So how does the Lightning Lane system work? Well, using the resort app, you can reserve one specific attraction at a time. Once you book a ride, you will get an hour return window when you can come back and scan in and take your ride. Not every single ride is included on this system, but just about all of the major attractions are. Now, you can only reserve one specific attraction once per day, i.e. you can't skip Guardians of the Galaxy twice in one day. Once you scan into your attraction, you are then eligible to book the next one, or you can book a next one if 2 hours goes by, whichever comes first. It is worth noting that Lightning Lane does not completely eliminate a ride's wait, rather it just greatly reduces it. The effectiveness of Lightning Lane does depend a little bit on the ride that you're using it on because merge points in the queues can be different in terms of how far they are from the station. Return windows aren't always available at the time you want them to be. Over time, they get pushed out hours ahead of the current time of day. This is most prevalent with Guardians of the Galaxy, Soarin' Around the World, and Toy Story Midway Mania. It's very important to note though that the park's best ride, Radiator Springs Racers, is not on the typical Lightning Lane system. Now, technically you can skip this queue, but in typical Disney fashion, it's going to cost you a little bit extra. There are a couple options for this. Number 1 is to purchase the Lightning Lane Premier. This basically functions the same as the Lightning Lane in terms of the fact that you can only skip one attraction once per day and it uses the same line, but there are no return windows needed. You can go as you please, but these are expensive, approaching $200. There's also an option to pay for a one-time Lightning Lane, which is a $20 fee to skip per person. This adds up very, very quickly. If you have a family of 5, you're adding another $100 to your day just to ride this one attraction. Is it really good? Absolutely, but I'm not sure if that Lightning Lane is really justified, in particular when you can use the single rider line. You can basically still wait with your party for the majority of the queue, so at least there's that. And while you will be separated from your party for the ride itself, sometimes you might even end up in the same car. Now, you are guaranteed to sit on the far right side, so if for some reason you want to sit in the middle or on the left, this won't really work with the single rider thing. The single rider line is getting longer than it was a couple of years ago, but in most cases, it's still no longer than 35 to 40 minutes at its worst. Compare this to the potentially 2-hour plus line the standby queue gets, and that looks a lot more favorable. My suggestion for Radiator Springs Racers is not to hit it first thing in the morning. My suggestion would be to wait, hit it a little bit later in the day, and use that single rider line. There are tons of people in the rope drop crowd that go here first, and like Rise to Resistance at Disneyland, I don't think that's the best decision. And unless you're one of the very first guests in the park, you are likely going to be waiting quite a while for Radiator Springs even in the morning, and it's going to take a large chunk out of your morning. For these reasons, my suggested touring plan for Disney California Adventure goes as follows, and we're really going to go to the pier first, starting with Incredicoaster. If you're one of the first ones in the park, you can probably even get an extra ride on Incredicoaster if you want. Then we're going to go over to Toy Story Midway Mania. This ride can build up a line pretty quick. Making our way around the bend, we will hit Goofy Sky School, and at this point I would start looking and booking Lightning Lanes for either Soarin' Around the World or Guardians of the Galaxy. And on your way to your Lightning Lane, you can hit The Little Mermaid. These are the major ones you want to ride. There are also some flat rides around Pixar Pier that you could do if you wanted. The main thing here though is to make sure that you don't use your Lightning Lanes for these attractions in the morning, because you should be able to get on all of these with minimal waits. And remember, you can only skip one specific attraction once per day, so if you pass up a 5-minute wait in the morning and use your Lightning Lane instead, you ruin any potential chance of a re-ride later in the day. Soarin' and Guardians are 2 attractions that you should definitely use Lightning Lane for though, because those are slow moving lines. This is all great and it works really well if you're one of the first ones in the park. Opening is 8 a.m. daily, and if you want to take advantage of those early crowds, you might have to get there quite a while in advance. The outside gate opens at 6:30 a.m. Granted, not too many people arrive for that, but quite a few people will arrive for security, which opens at 7 a.m. Then the turnstiles open around 7:15, and early entry people start to be admitted at that same time. Now, early entry people can't actually ride anything until 7:30, and then official rope drop and park opening is at 8. You can get on an attraction pretty early if you're at the front of the rope drop queue, and to do that, generally you need to be at the front of the security crew. Again, you want to take advantage of these morning crowds, and the morning and nighttime are the 2 best times to be at California Adventure and the Disneyland Resort as a whole, the first 3 and last 3 hours of park operation. DCA's hours are usually shorter than Disneyland's, but still very, very fair, open till at least 8 p.m. Even with a good touring plan and Lightning Lane, will you encounter long queues? Yeah, of course. But one thing this park does well outside of the hours is that there are very fast dispatches for every single attraction. In general, their cast members do a great job of not only keeping rides going and keeping ride vehicles on the course, and as many as they can, but also being friendly and helpful. According to RCDB, a train on Incredicoaster departs every 36 seconds, and you know what? I gotta believe that. It's impressive. So, with all that being said, and all our framework in place, let's get an in-depth look at the attraction lineup at Disney California Adventure, going land by land throughout the whole park. Even though Buena Vista Street doesn't have any rides, I think it's the place we ought to start, as it's the first land you'll enter when you go into DCA. Buena Vista Street doesn't feel too dissimilar to Main Street on the opposite side of the resort at Disneyland. This area has some of the best and most fun music that you'll find in any land at the resort. All the buildings are nicely well themed, and outside of some shops and eateries, the only real thing to mention here is Carfe Circle. This is one of your best dining options in the entirety of California Adventure. Just note that if you do want to eat here, it is best to book a reservation ahead of time. Overall, Buena Vista Street is a pretty solid introduction to California Adventure, even if it doesn't have any mechanical rides at this juncture. Making a loop around the park, let's go to the left here for Hollywoodland. This land looks decent and definitely reminds me of Disney's Hollywood Studios. Granted, California Adventure used to have a Tower of Terror of their own. Besides that, you'll find one mechanical ride in here, and that is Monsters Inc. My Console to the Rescue. This is one of those dark rides that I would describe as good but not outstanding. You basically follow the story of the first Monsters Inc. film. While none of the figures have super impressive movement, there are a lot to look at. I think they did a nice job with this overall, and frankly, California Adventure could use another ride or two that's not an e-ticket, and it just takes crowds. Monsters Inc. is one of those. You also have Mickey's PhilharMagic, which is a 4D show. This is a pretty nice option if you want to sit down and relax for 10 or 15 minutes in the air conditioning. More so than Mickey, the story actually follows Donald as you try to get Mickey's Sorcerer's Hat back to him for the concert. Throughout, you're taken through many of Disney's most famous films and songs. I also appreciate the real animatronic of Donald that you see at the end of the show. Overall, PhilharMagic is solid, but not something you must hit. Right there with PhilharMagic, you also have some interactive attractions. These include the Animation Academy, Turtle Talk with Crush, On and Elsa's Welcome, and the Sorcerer's Workshop. Once again, these are nice to get a break from the hot weather. So overall, Hollywoodland is not bad, but it does feel a little bit incomplete, and I would like to see something else added to this land in the future. Continuing on, let's go to Avengers Campus. I can't help but think that this land is going to be better in the future if they add another ride, and I can't help but thinking that it could be a lot better than it is. That being said, they do have a standout attraction, that being Guardians of the Galaxy Mission Breakout. Of course, this was formerly Tower of Terror that I mentioned earlier. While the line does move slow, there's a lot to look at in the queue. And it also features a great pre-show with one of the better animatronics in the whole park, with, of course, Rocket the Raccoon. The ride itself feels exactly how a Guardians of the Galaxy ride should feel, which is just a good time. You never quite know what to expect because you might get a slightly different story on the screens or a different drop sequence. This ride doesn't have one major drop, rather it has a bunch of smaller drops, and it never stops moving. These drops, more often than not, provide awesome floater airtime. And while this isn't saying much, this is the most airtime a ride has here at California Adventure. The other ride here is one of the newer ones, Web Slinger's A Spider-Man Adventure. This is another screen-based ride, this time being an interactive shooting dark ride. It uses some cool technology that allows you to shoot at targets without even having a gun. It's similar to Ninjago at the Legoland parks. It can be fun because of its competition, but it's certainly not one of the best in the park. Pym Test Kitchen is an interesting restaurant as well to check out. As I mentioned, I feel that Avengers Campus could be a lot better than it is, and it's rumored that they're going to receive a third ride at some point in the future, and hopefully it's physical sets based in some way. Also take note that there's almost no cover from the sun in this area, and it can get very, very warm. Actually, California Adventure in general doesn't have a ton of cover from those hot days. Let's go now to the best land in the park, Cars Land. As someone who really enjoys the Cars franchise, this area feels straight out of the films. They did an incredible job. In some areas, it looks identical. It's wild. One of the best lands Disney has ever created, there's no doubt. The star attraction here is Radiator Springs Racers. There are many wonderful animatronics on the indoor bit, and the racing bit at the end is a lot of fun. That whole section takes place around some beautiful rock work. Every square inch on this ride was thought out, from the rock work on the outside to the animatronics and the dark ride scenes on the inside. I think most people would say that this is the best ride in the park, and even though there are some other really fun attractions here, I don't think it's particularly close. Mater's Junkyard Jamboree is essentially Disney's take on a classic scrambler. Like the scrambles you're used to, this ride has some awesome laterals, going both directions. One of the best parts about Mater's Junkyard Jamboree though is the background music. Mater is singing the whole time, and I gotta say, it's pretty hilarious. This ride usually has a pretty manageable wait in comparison to some of the other major rides at this park, so I definitely recommend giving it a ride. If nothing else, you'll get a laugh out of it. The last ride here is Luigi's Rollickin' Roadsters. This is another ride that's basically a glorified flat ride, and while it looks really awesome off-ride with all the vehicles being synced up to music and to one another, on-ride it's just okay. Frankly, I think this ride might be more fun to watch than it is to actually ride, because it looks very cool off-ride. Which is not to say it's bad or anything, just a filler attraction. Now, one thing I will say about Luigi's is that we've definitely had some problems with this ride's reliability. It feels like almost every time we go and try to ride it, it either breaks down or has some sort of delay. So if you see it open with a pretty short wait, maybe consider giving it a ride right there. You can get food from a couple different places within Cars Land. Flo's V8 Cafe is probably the most notable. You can get breakfast, lunch, or dinner here. And if you're looking for some ice cream, the Cozy Cone Motel is a solid option there. Overall, Cars Land is a masterpiece, and the Starland in California Adventure. Oh, and make sure you pop in at night in Cars Land. I think it's probably the best area in all of California Adventure after the sun goes down. Very briefly, let's go to the newly modified San Fran Tokyo Square. I do like the new bridge, and in general, the only thing that you really need to take note of here is a bunch of eateries. There are a lot of nice options varying in genre, so whatever you want to do. Let's go now to Pixar Pier. Of course, as I mentioned at the beginning, this originally opened as Paradise Pier, trying to emulate the feel of a boardwalk. This, of course, is why California Screamin', now Incredicoaster, was designed the way it was. It was made to look like an old classic wood coaster. This is the most famous attraction from this area, no doubt, so I feel like we should start with Incredicoaster. I really wish Incredicoaster had different restraints. I understand why Disney has the over-the-shoulder restraints, but they don't need to be so bulky like the ones on this coaster are. But besides that, this is a really fun coaster. While it does at times walk the line between a family coaster and a thrill coaster, this is by far the most thrilling coaster at the Disneyland Resort. Riders will reach speeds of 55 miles an hour and traverse over 6,000 feet of track. You gotta give it that, this coaster is extremely long. In that sense, it is more rewarding after a long wait than many other coasters are. In terms of theming, this ride was kind of put in an awkward spot because it didn't really have much theming when it opened as California Screamin', outside of having awesome onboard audio. Which, as it turns out, this ride still does. It's an awesome soundtrack. And the whole ride, you are trying to catch up to Jack Jack, who of course has escaped. Overall, the music and story are a lot of fun, and definitely elevate the overall experience. In a perfect world, would this coaster have some sharper elements or drops? Yeah, sure, but for what Disney was trying to do, I think they did a relatively good job, and Incredicoaster is a very enjoyable ride. Located very nearby to Incredicoaster is Toy Story Midway Mania. This is an interactive shooting dark ride, and one of the better ones you're going to find. Frankly, it's much better than Spider-Man that we mentioned earlier. Unlike Spider-Man though, this one does actually use guns. There is not a true story in this ride, you are simply playing carnival games that the Toy Story characters have set up. There's some clever touches of theming between the screens, and because you bounce back and forth between these minigames pretty quickly, it keeps it fresh and interesting. I also appreciate how on this ride you can see where you're shooting on screen. Many shooting dark rides don't have this, and it makes it very difficult to aim properly. Now, that hasn't exactly helped me win too much, but you know what I mean. Now, let's talk about the Pixar Pal Round. This is the definition of a ride that you either love or hate. I don't know if I'd go as far as to say I hate it, but I don't particularly enjoy it. Now, if you want to make it a little more thrilling, they do have swinging cars in addition to the normal stationary cars that you'd find on most Ferris wheels. If you sit in these gondolas, you can instantly turn this into a thrill ride, and you know what? I should try it at some point in the future. Going around the bend a little bit, we have Goofy Sky School, which is a pretty normal Mack Wild Mouse coaster. Now, I say pretty normal, but one of the main drops was modified to have it not be nearly as steep, so you aren't going to get any airtime on this one, but there are still some good laterals and cute touches of theming. So I enjoy it, but that being said, this ride makes absolutely zero sense at a Disney park. 4-person cars just doesn't really work. There's also a dark ride here in The Little Mermaid Ariel's Undersea Adventure. One of the great things about this ride is that it rarely has a long queue line. And if you are in Pixar Pier early in the morning, this should be an absolute walk-on. I really have no idea why this was added to Lightning Lane. I think it's really just for perceived value of the Lightning Lane pass, but it really shouldn't have it because the lines don't justify it. If anything, the lines for this ride are probably longer now that Lightning Lane has been implemented. But regardless, it's a pretty solid ride with physical sets. And there's some decent animatronics, with Ursula by far being the best. I would put this in a similar tier to Monsters Inc. It's good, don't get me wrong, but not an e-ticket. To play into the pier theme that they were trying to go for here, there are many smaller flat rides scattered throughout. None of these are too notable though, and they're all one and dones at most. Another thing to note about Pixar Pier is that they typically will have nighttime spectaculars here. The rides in the area will understandably close in the time surrounding the show, so make sure you know when the shows are happening and when the rides are going to be closed temporarily for it. If you want a good spot, also make sure to arrive far before the actual starting time of the show. World of Color is a good example of what they can do here. There are also some solid places to eat throughout Pixar Pier, most notably Lamplight Lounge. If you want to eat here like Carthay Circle, make sure you grab a reservation, that'll greatly help you. There's also some decent quick service options like Paradise Garden Grill and Boardwalk Pizza and Pasta. For desserts, there's the adorable snowman frosted treats, and there's some pretty good options here and some unique ones. The pier doesn't really have as immersive theming as some other areas of the park. Now, they do a good job of making it feel like a pier, but it's just different than Cars Land or some of these other areas. One thing I'll say though is that one of the best places to sit in the entirety of California Adventure, outside of near the canyon in Cars Land, is on the opposite side of Incredicoaster and the Pixar Pal Round. You will always see trains running on Incredicoaster, and there's a lot of kinetic energy because of it. And, factor in the flat rides as well, and this is probably the best area of the park when it comes to kinetic energy from the rides themselves. Let's move on here to our last major area, and that of course is Grizzly Peak. There are sections of California Adventure that feel like they lack shade or natural beauty, but this area is not one of them. There are a ton of trees, and the Grand Californian serves as an awesome backdrop. I love all the water in this area as well, and that is really set around Grizzly River Run, which is the Rapids ride. I actually have not ridden this one. It's the most major attraction in the park I haven't been on, but from what I hear, it's a good, not great, representative of the genre. One thing's for sure though, this ride would feel awesome on a hot summer's day, which no doubt happens here in Southern California. The better of the two rides though is Soarin' Around the World. This flight simulator is very different than a lot of the ones you might be used to. It is a very chill, relaxing experience taking you over many of the world's most famous landmarks. And for the Food and Wine Festival, they bring back the original Soarin' Over California, which is what you're seeing right now. Both have their highlights, but one thing that they definitely share is an awesome soundtrack. For most of the year, it'll be Soarin' Around the World, and that has one of the best soundtracks on any ride out there. Bringing back the original for a limited time is appreciated though, especially for those that experienced it when it opened in 2001. Now let's not forget about the Redwood Creek Challenge Trail. This is a nice walkthrough attraction that kids really enjoy. This area buds right up to the Grand Californian and has some fun things for them to do like little zip lines. Overall, Grizzly Peak is an area that I wish there was more of. It really does pay homage to its state, something that the rest of California Adventure has stopped caring about a long time ago. Overall, Disney California Adventure is presented very nicely. As I mentioned, the footpaths are wider here than in Disneyland, and so you can appreciate some of those sites a bit more. Most areas have solid theming and immersion. The ride lineup is good, not great. I think in some areas it's a bit top heavy, and they could use some more filler attractions. Now by filler attractions, I don't mean more flat rides because they have plenty of those already. I am more referring to dark rides on the caliber of Little Mermaid, Monsters Inc., or even higher quality than that. The top 5 though, of Incredicoaster, Guardians, Radiator Springs Racers, Soarin', and Toy Story Midway Mania is pretty good. How much time do you need depends on your interests a little bit. If you just want to ride the e-tickets, you probably don't need a full day, but if you want to experience the whole park, then a full day would be recommended. Of course, in my estimation, the best option is to do multiple days at the resort and have park hopper tickets, but if that's not an option, a full day could be a good idea, and you could get everything done in that time. So, at the end of the day, do I recommend visiting Disney California Adventure? Yes, I absolutely do. Is it flawed? 100%. But are there some good rides and areas? Absolutely. Because we're still talking about a Disney park, operations are elite, and the park typically runs at a pretty high level. It's one of those parks where you have to take the good with the could be better, but in general, I think you'll enjoy your time here. So, those are my thoughts on Disney California Adventure, the second gate at the Disneyland Resort. Let me know what you think of this park in the comments below, and if you made it to the end, please consider giving this video a like and subscribing for more theme park and roller coaster videos coming in the near future. Thank you all so much for watching. I'll see you next time.